What's up, nice dudes? I'm Altaf.
And I'm Chris.
And welcome to the final podcast. This is actually the final podcast. There will actually be no other podcast that will exist after this.
Thank you for clarifying what the final podcast means.
No, I mean in general. I'm not just talking about ours.
Oh, we're going to end the entire genre of podcasts for everyone. So there'll be no more rewatchables episodes or...
Yeah, no more hi, I'm a celebrity that maybe doesn't get that much work anymore. So here's my podcast.
Oh, that's mean, but I like it.
Even worse. I'm a very well-paid celebrity, but I'm still going to have a podcast and get many more sponsorships and ad reads than any up-and-coming podcaster ever fucking could.
It just happens with platforms, right? Like, I feel like, that happened with YouTube as well. When suddenly Will Smith, Jack Black, and The Rock all had YouTube channels all of a sudden. And it's like, what are you guys doing here? You guys don't need this.
I do feel like The Rock was the first mainstream celebrity that kind of embraced YouTube a little bit. And then, it was kind of over after that. Yeah. And I mean, anything that just becomes big enough sucks. So, on that note...
Luckily, that's why we're ending this show before we get too big.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to prevent.
We could see this thing really exploding. So we were just like, we got to get out.
We got to get the hell out of here. It's nice dude tradition.
Okay, so I'll start by sharing a little bit on why we ended the podcast and why we went back to uploading on Nice Dude Movie Night. We were kind of going with the flow a little bit. We knew that the podcast wasn't garnering a huge audience, but we didn't care. We were kind of just doing it as a hobby. And then Chris came to me and was like, you came to me and you said, I want to do video essays. You initially were like, I was thinking about doing it on my own at first, and then I was like, this would be something that would be good to do together, and here's a long shot. Would you be down to put it up on the Nice Dude Movie Night channel? And you were, I would say, was the quickest I've said yes to something. And
if we had timers of how long it took for Altaf to come around on an idea I had.
I will say, I was pretty nervous the week after I said yes of posting on the Nice Dude Movie Night channel a video that wasn't a reaction video after a year of not uploading at all. So it's not like I was whatever about it, but it was kind of a quick that just sounds great. You and I would have so much fun. We were just missing, I think you and I were both missing actually making something together rather than just talking on a mic, really making videos,
Yeah, there was always a difference. We tried to put that into the podcast, but there's only so much you can do on a podcast format. We always tried to put our own special sauce, if you will, because we kind of tried to do that for the Nice Dude channel when we were first doing reactions and stuff. We always edited them in a certain way or tried to put some type of creative spin.
Yeah.
And it's just funny because that's reaction. It's not like that's a whole, oh, you and I made something, because we're just watching movies. But there was always a different... I don't know. There were more choices involved and more creativity, and I think you and I have been kind of separately on our own. I've been itching to make stuff. You've been trying to get more into writing as well on the side, and like I said, I was itching to make something on YouTube because I was originally thinking of an idea that was my own personal channel and seeing if I can grow something, and just the idea came to me and it seemed to make sense. Of oh, you and I could probably make really good video essays together. And if we wrote them ahead of time, and you and I are virtual right now, we don't need to be together if we write it in such a way that, separates the chapters and, I can read a segment, you can read a segment, and still get creative together and edit it in such a way. We thought we could have fun doing that, and our Nice Dude audience might enjoy that.
Although I will say, a lot of the bromance video essay that we did was obviously shot in our respective homes, but the opening sketch we shot together, and that was truly a lot of fun. And before the shoot, I was a bit anxious and stressed out, like I can be when we're setting up and everything. So that took some time. But when we got into the thick of it, it was it was a good reminder of what it was like when we used to shoot those ad reads for the Nice Dude Movie Night channel, where there was always this like fun, like high school making a video project energy to it. You know what I mean? Oh, what about this idea? What about during the Brokeback Mountain part, I like turned my head, which I have never been that inspired. Like, I haven't been that inspired in probably years when I came up with that idea.
I know. Well, that's a good way to phrase it, though. Like the high school kids making a video, because we, obviously you and I love movies, and we're obviously incredibly passionate about that and art in general, and the way it moves our souls. We try to have such deep conversations, but we also like to make the dumbest shit possible. I mean, all of our ad reads, we never meant for it to be fancy or to take itself that seriously. We're just a couple guys making YouTube videos, and we kind of still want to live by that whenever we make stuff together.
Yeah, and it is nerve-wracking. I don't know how people well, when this podcast episode goes out, it's going to go out the same day as the video essay goes out. And I've been telling Chris, like, when we were shooting the video essay, not the opening sketch, when we were shooting our segments, I want you to share your experience. I personally wasn't nervous at all. Like, it was like, for some reason, I was just like, this is gonna be great. And when we were like, we had written the script, you had written the script, we had done revisions together, so I was very confident on the material that we had written, and we worked hard on, and Chris worked so hard on, and I was so confident. But I do feel that, like, when it gets to the upload date, that's when I'm going to be really anxious. Like, that's when I'm going to get pretty nervous, and I'm going to have to learn to, like, kind of accept the fact that not everyone on our channel is going to be excited about the fact that we're back after a year and we're not doing reactions, So that's something I'm very curious about. I like what that kind of response will be,
Yeah. I mean, it's funny that I don't know. I mean, I'm genuinely, pondering about this. That, like, do you think we just shoot differently when we're separate? Like, I don't think I've ever seen you genuinely in a good mood looking forward to a shoot once in my entire time shooting with you. And that's fine. Like, it's whatever. You and I have our own process. I'm not judging or anything like that. It's just funny to hear, like, that you weren't nervous at all going into it. Because I'm like, I was terrified. I was, like, jazzing myself up. I went downstairs. I was drinking tea. I was checking my voice. I was pacing around. Like, I was super nervous. And
I can, and you know what's crazy? You told me that over the phone, and I was shocked. I was like, I've never seen Chris that anxious before a shoot. Like, mine was like the opposite.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, and maybe, like, on the flip side, like, maybe I feel better shooting with someone a little bit. You know what I mean? Maybe, like, when we're both in it together, it's like I feel a little more confident, or whatever it is.
I just think, like, I can be sometimes a bit of a control freak. And I think sometimes I'm just like, I want it the way I like it. I want, like, I don't want us to make a mess. I want things to be here. I want to set up at this time. And that is honestly not the most collaborative way to work. It's not a thing I'm proud of. So I'm not saying that this is how it should be. But because I was shooting on my own, I was able to be like, all right, I'm going to start setting up on this time, and I'm going to set it up this way, and I can do it, like, in my pace. And I was a bit more like, okay. And then there's also that, like, when I'm anxious, I get very insecure. So, like, while I'm setting up, I'm constantly thinking, is Chris mad at me? Is Chris upset that I'm upset? Like, 'cause you know what I mean? And because I wasn't in my own head, I was able to just be like, we're fucking making a video. And I think you could probably tell, Chris, it was like, I was sending you photos with me and the pig. Like, I was.
Oh, yeah. God damn. Those are so stupid.
And those are the type, I mean, like I guess on a more positive note of working together in the same room, I think you and I, like, do bring out certain things about each other that's really good when we're shooting together. Like, I think you do help me be more silly, I will say.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you help me kind of loosen up a little bit. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. But I guess just to kind of go back to fully answer the question of to our audience of, like, why we're fully ending the show, I think it just comes down to the simplicity of, like, we just don't have the physical room for it. especially for something that we considered a hobby for a while. Like we never really did this for any money, or we never really wanted to make any money off of it. It was never something we were like, oh, we gotta like really like if it was one of those things where like if it grew, it'd be really cool, and we were open to that and seeing like kind of taking it one step at a time. But the real goal of the podcast was to kind of just like get something out there, just to kind of have an excuse for Altaf and I to talk once a week and shoot the shit about movies that we like. And I think just the bandwidth was just limited. So, we feel more excited to do, video essays for the time being. And so we just thought it made sense just to allocate our energy into that.
Totally. And I think like I want to make it clear because I understand that it maybe might seem like we're going for a cash grab by being like, well, this wasn't making us money. This was a hobby. Now let's go to the Nice Dude Movie Night channel. Again, we're very aware of the fact that we're not going to get the same number of views that we used to get on the reaction channel. Like it would be super cocky of us to be like, oh yeah, we're going full time. We're doing video essays on a reaction channel. Like, I think Chris and I obviously are expecting more people to be engaged with it because we have a bigger audience there. But we are still doing the video essays because we want to do them. You know what I mean?
Well, and outside of all of that too, a big reason we ended the reaction channel was because of, some of our finances were harder. You and I are doing fine personally right now. Like we have nothing to gain coming on to here. You know what I'm saying? This isn't like a place of desperation or anything like that. It's the complete opposite. It's like you and I are, are more secure than before. We're doing better physically and mentally too. Yeah. This is purely from a place of inspiration, not desperation. You know what I mean? It's purely just because we want to do it for fun and we think our audience might like it. We wouldn't do it if we didn't think the audience would like it.
If we weren't in the right mental space for it. If we were in the mental space that we were when we were doing reactions and in the financial space that we were when we were doing reactions, there's no way in hell we would go back to that Nice Dude Movie Night channel. I think the reason like we consider like what we're going to upload there very closely is because we know that has a huge audience and we don't want to take that lightly, So this was there was a good amount of thought, even though I said very quickly. We were kind of assessing things. Like there was a level of like, okay, maybe we'll just go do the podcast twice a month, And then I just thought, I think I brought it to you. I'm like, I think if we're going to do this, we have to go all in. Like if we want to do video essays, if we want to make them good, like if we want to make good videos, we got to just put all our time into that,
Yeah, I mean, you and I had a lot of conversations about really making sure we're respecting the audience, of the Nice Dude Movie Night channel. We wanted it to still feel like Nice Dude in a weird way, to capture kind of the silly goofiness and the chemistry and kind of the joy behind, not to over romanticize it, because again, we're just a couple guys that filmed ourselves watching movies. But, we always try to bring forth something to the table, when it comes to the excitement that we get. And we try to figure out what people liked about us. And we tried to see if we can put that into the form of video essays. And I guess just to wrap up my point is just we really wanted to make sure we were respecting them, that it wasn't just some cynical cash grab like you mentioned earlier.
I want to spend like the second half of this episode like talking a little bit about the podcast itself, like movies that changes itself. I think it was like overall, like I'm going to look back at this as a very rewarding experience because I feel like we tried our best to go about doing a movie podcast in a way that felt unique to us, where there's so many out there. And I think you and I always push to find something a little bit more deep and a little bit more vulnerable and personal to us. And I was always kind of just amazed by because I used to edit the episodes. I was amazed by like the amount of people that would like write in and share their personal stories based on the movie we're doing. Like you and I would get into some deep and heavy stuff, especially during the Lord of the Rings run or like Good Will Hunting and stuff like that. And I feel like even in movies like the SpongeBob SquarePants movie or like like even the silly ones, I feel like you and I would always try to find something and to show that movies mean something to us more emotionally. And so I will always find that as like, oh, I'm glad we did that. I'm glad we tried that,
Yeah. It was always really fun to kind of go through emotional rabbit holes, I guess, that movies can provide, Like whenever we would plan ahead for a movie, that was always a thing of like, okay, what's kind of the thing we're going to talk about more than, and I say this all the time throughout the show, so I'll just say it one last time because we're on the last episode, but we always try to do more than just talking about how good a movie is and just being like, that scene's really cool. Yeah, that scene is really cool. I love this director. Yeah, I love it. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think we always try to reach in just a little deeper just to see what, how it might hit home for us in such a way, or might, maybe help us get through a hard time, or maybe we're nostalgic about it because I watched this when I was young and it makes me think of this and that. And like you said, it was really cool to hear other people who emailed us, who wrote in for the show, who like got that, who understood we're on the show's wavelength
Oh
and were
yeah.
able to relate the exact same way. It was cool that we kind of felt like we were all kind of this little community of people that kind of look deeper into movies emotionally from like a writing standpoint than just purely, just admiring the spectacle of a big action movie or whatever it is.
I know. What were do you have like a couple of episodes that pop into mind where you're like, "Oh, these are some of my favorites that we did?"
Oh, yeah, there's some episodes I'm definitely fond of. I am fond of the Napoleon Dynamite episode.
Yeah.
I'm fond of the Austin Powers episode for sure.
Yeah, the awesome, like especially like International Man of Mystery was doing that episode was just so much fucking fun
Yeah.
because we were in person for that, right? Or were we not?
Yeah, we were in person. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how did you feel about like doing them in person versus doing them remotely? Because here's what I'll say. I know you and I differ on this, and I know you just said, I was like, I wonder if we shoot differently or whatever. And I seemed a little bit more happier knowing that I was shooting by myself with a video essay. With the podcast itself, I did miss having you here because I felt like there was always something missing, not being able to actually like talk to you in person. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think they both had pros and cons. Like, and I mean that honestly. I think like um the thing I like about shooting remotely is kind of for this probably the same reasons you brought up earlier, that like the comfort of like I can have my setup the way I like it and I can just show up and sit down and shoot without having to like, not in a harsh way, but worrying about another person, making sure they're okay and in a good mood and making sure we're all kind of like, I think sometimes like when it was in person it felt a little cramped because we had to like sit right across from each other. We had lights on either side of us and then we have to act like we're like super comfortable with each other, even though it's like kind of tight. We just barely set this thing up, and
Oh yeah.
But there is an authenticity though that comes with like, actually looking in your eyes, and when we're talking about something maybe a little vulnerable, there is a different feeling that comes with it that can't really be replaced by Zoom.
Yeah, it's true. And, I think the episodes that also I feel so grateful for is the guest ones because we did 2 episodes, one with Hold Down A and George that were in person, where Chris and I were in person and we had them as guests, and those were a lot of fun. We also had TBR Schmidt twice, and I look back at those episodes fondly too because I'm like, oh wait, they did us like a huge favor. Like those guests did like us a huge favor. They have huge channels and they took out the time, and it means a lot to me. I think like specifically, especially with, I loved all our guests, but especially with like TBR Schmidt, it was like both times we had them on, we got to learn more about them as parents and what they feel anxious about. It was just like a perfect way to like, it always felt perfect for our show too.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I think the nice thing about chatting with reactors is like their personalities on camera are basically the same thing in real life. Like, we've gotten on private calls with all of them. All of them are super easy to get along with. Like they're all good people, you know.
Yeah.
They were all super down and just wanted to go on. And like you said, it was purely just because they just wanted to chat with us and make something kind of fun. They had nothing to gain from it from like an influencer standpoint. It didn't really grow their channels in any way. It was purely just because they just wanted to have a cool conversation with us and maybe other people might enjoy it. So yeah, like you said, it'll always mean something special to me too.
I guess this goes in tandem with what this episode, what movies that changed us episodes were kind of like. But I think a kind of deep question is, did this podcast in any way change how you watch movies?
Probably in subconscious ways. I can't really put it into words like just off the top of my head right now. Just like, oh yeah, I realize this and that, but probably one. I mean, we've been doing this for over a year.
Mm-hmm.
I think we
Yeah.
started this show in like what, like April or March of 2024. Yeah, so I mean, it must have, because once we had the concept down, and it did. I do think of that sort of thing. Maybe not literally like, inserting myself into every story or every emotion of like, huh, how do I relate to this? How do I feel? But sometimes I do look at it from a perspective of like, yeah, like how art is subjective and it can move you and kind of contextualize your life in such a way. So yeah, I would say so. What about you?
I think similar to you, it's not like a one-to-one of like, how do I relate to this? But I will say the challenge of the podcast was obviously you'd have movies like Lord of the Rings, which is like so easy to put your personal emotions and your feelings into and your anxieties into, because Lord of the Rings is about life and growing up, or like feeling like you're not in all those things. But the challenge is taking movies that weren't meant to be, I guess, looked like that, and see if you can find something deeper emotional in there. It like ingrained in me a little bit to like when I watch movies that are not just like these emotional epics that are just like blockbuster cinema, I always try to like see if that movie's moving me at least an ounce emotionally. And that's kind of how I look at what movies really mean something to me. And not like, I'll give you a specific example. Like two blockbuster horror movies came out this year, Sinners and Weapons. And I was having a conversation with my roommate who was saying that Sinners was like a amazing cinematic experience, where it was like you were just so focused on like how it was so visually vibrant and unique, and the sound was so great. But Weapons was like a movie that actually moved her emotionally because of the kids and everything. And I was like, huh, that's interesting, because Sinners like affected me in a way that was so much deeper than the cinematic aspects of it. It was like it. Like you can listen to our podcast, but it was to me that movie was so much about why I like love art. And
Yeah.
I will say, if it wasn't for doing the Sinners podcast, I wouldn't even have able to make that distinction in my head of like what made Sinners special to me and what made Weapons special to me.
Yeah. I think like I remember feeling that a little bit. Funny enough, this is like a completely different movie, but when we did Austin Powers, I remember like we asked each other questions like, do you ever feel like out of time a little bit? Like there are certain things that
Yeah.
like I think that's what, just not to totally derail it into Austin Powers, but like, the thing that makes Austin Powers fun is that fish out of water element that Austin Powers has. At least the first movie's all about that, right? It's really like a celebration of like the good and the bad of the 60s counterculture up against the 90s. That's like the undertone of it. Obviously it has funny parodies and all that stuff, but there's always like something else a little bit more going on. And so even for stuff like Napoleon Dynamite, you and I try to figure out like what is the feeling that it gives you that kind of makes it interesting. How we relate to it, why we find it funny or why we find it moving, like you said.
We didn't include Napoleon Dynamite in the video essay itself, but there is, when we were writing it, there was like a lot of conversation about Napoleon Dynamite, and I always, because of obviously the friendship between Napoleon and Pedro, and I always think about that shot of Pedro looking up towards the end, thinking about his friend.
Exactly. Well, what's funny is couple months ago, I was chatting with my dad and I was recommending Everything Everywhere All at Once to him. And I didn't want to spoil that movie to him because that's the movie you want to go in blind, of course. But I was telling him a little bit about like, just, I was trying to sell him on it a little bit of like, it's about these multiple worlds. And then this one woman, can access all these different parts of herself so she can, gain whatever. And the thing that I said though was like, yeah, and like, it's really weird, but you have to watch it to really get it. Like you have to see it to fully understand. Like I can't just pitch it to you. But like while it has multiple universes, really what it's supposed to mean is like, the concept of like when you can do anything in your whole life, you might not realize what's kind of right there in front of you. I was kind of just trying to, I was telling him that a little bit. And then my dad just said, you have a gift, son, for like describing movies. He was like, I wonder if there's a way you can make a living doing that sort of thing. But you have a gift to like kind of to clearly explain like what something means, you know. He did tell me that, and I was like, oh, that's really cool to hear.
And you're like, Dad, I'm trying my best.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, what's funny though is when we were doing this video essay, I did think about that a little bit. I tried to think about that in the sense of like, you know, okay, people do like the way I describe movies or pitch movies or walk through a scene or just, you know, so I'm like, okay, so I think I could try doing that a little bit or see if I can write it in such a way. And obviously, hopefully it will get better. On paper, in the most loving way possible, I hope this essay is our worst, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So that way each one will be better.
It would suck if that was our peak. Yeah. No, I mean, listen, it's interesting doing the podcast with you, even for a year, and even having listened to way more podcasts. I always felt that you were better at it than me because you were always better at expressing your thoughts more efficiently and more directly. And for me, it always took a long rambling to get to it. And
well, yeah, they're good yin and yangs of each other. Like for me, I'll be able to summarize it in like one sentence, but then we'll still have like 29 and a half minutes left to record. And we got to figure out a way to make it last.
I can definitely like fill up space. Like I am good at that. But yeah, no, I always felt kind of self-conscious. I'm like, I don't think I'm actually that good at talking about movies in a easy to understand way. But what I am good at is expressing my passion for movies. Like if I like something, or if I like really care about something, you will know. And so when I was recording my portion of the video essay, I was trying my best to show that part of myself of like, okay, you love movies, you love these bromance movies. Like people need to know. And so that's why I always try to bring that energy in there, you know?
It's the TikTok of Martin Scorsese. Like, you're proud of these movies.
Oh God, I know.
But I mean, just to, you know, say real quick, you are so natural at podcasting though. Like if you go back, listeners, I'm sure you can all agree. Like if you go back to the early episodes, you're so much more comfortable talking than I am, than how comfortable I am. You know, I have a problem with that. Like I have a problem with like trying to elaborate on my thoughts because like I have like an aversion to talking about myself or really like, you know, putting my personality into words, you know, whatever you want to call it. Like I'm very, like you said, I can be very shorthanded with, you know, my comments and stuff, which is like not always the best in podcasting. So just you and I think are equally skilled, but just in completely different ways, just to be clear. You know, I've been heavily insecure, you know, in terms of how good you are and how natural you are at talking compared to me too. So like, just, you know, commenters, I'm sure you, again, like I said, I'm sure you can all agree, like give Altaf some love for that, you know?
Isn't that so funny how we both are like, well, he's obviously better. Like,
yeah, this is his thing, not my thing.
And that's just how our minds work.
Yeah.
And I guess we can wrap it up here. For those of you who made this show a part of your like weekly routine, we would get like messages of like, oh, I'd listen to this while I'm cooking. I'm going to be sad that it's gone. Or, and those are the comments that we got of like, well, first nice dude and now this. And I was biting my tongue. I'm like, oh no, we're going to come back in like a month. Just wait. But for those of you who did listen regularly and made it a part of your routine, thank you so much. It like, it means a lot, especially those of you who emailed in and some would send paragraphs and share their stories. It was always meaningful.
Anyone who took time out of their day to like write to us and like let us read your stories and to share that with, because you're sharing that not just with me and Alta, but also with like any listeners, with other people. It's like a group experience. You know, there's a vulnerability that comes with that, especially people who share very personal stories. So thank you for writing in. We really do appreciate that.
Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Last but not least, stay nice.